Hello, everyone. We're back.
Yeah, and we're live.
And we're live. Um, Sans music because it doesn't want to work. Just hates me. Music hates me. So we're gonna dive right in. Sans music, and we'll add it in post. Doing it live as per usual. Welcome everyone to the Underground QA podcast, a podcast about quality assurance in the video game industry. I'm Ariel Smith, test discipline manager at Bungie. My pronouns are she, her, and I have three fellow QA professionals with me today, and I will let them introduce themselves, starting
So,
with Marcin.
hi there. I'm Marcin, and my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, my name is Evgeny. My pronouns is he, him.
My name is David Benefield. My pronouns are also he, him.
Awesome. So we're doing something special today, which is a mock interview. Interviews are stressful events in which we have to be at our best to showcase potential companies who want to hire us. Doing interviews is a skill that needs practice. It doesn't matter if you're the interviewer or the interviewee. We want to showcase today how such interviews might look, how to prepare for them, how to make the best of them. And it's going to be a compressed version as recruitment can take multiple meetings and multiple hours. And Evgeny is also a pro at doing mock interviews, so we brought him here to kind of tell us a little bit about how he runs mock interviews and kind of give us some tips and tricks in running them. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes here kind of setting the stage, talking to Evgeny about how he traditionally runs mock interviews. Then we're going to dive into the interview itself, which will probably be 45 minutes. And for that, we'll be interviewing David, who has kindly volunteered to be our practice interviewee. And then at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about how the interview went, some of our feedback for David in terms of what he thought. And as a fun added bonus, we've planted some red flags in this interview, some potential things for David to look out for that maybe he wants to be wary of in a potential employer. And so we'll ask him what red flags he noticed and if they would potentially stop him from proceeding with employment with this potential employer. But to start us off, let's start with Evgeny. Evgeny, tell us a little bit about what you do with mock interviews and what your approach is, why you do them, and also maybe tell us a little bit about where people can find some of those mock interviews if they're interested.
Yeah, thank you, Ariel, for nice intro. I'm very delighted. But mock interviews, yeah, I'm doing the mock interviews along with Adil Mansour. He's a director of engineering also. But eventually it started with meetups that we hosted offline, in person. But obviously COVID hit, and instead of meetups, we decided to do the mock interviews. So I usually invite hiring managers, the people who are making decisions in hiring, and I was by myself curious, like what are they looking in the candidate, and what is like red flags and go to key elements during the interview, right? And which is interesting in the mock interviews that we all people, we are all different, we have different preferences, right? In general, there's some certain patterns what our hiring managers are looking, but it could be also very different. For example, something that I like, the other person he will be disliking, and for some people it will work. In some companies, even inside the companies, I saw conflicts like, oh, this person doesn't have XYZ, and another guy said, well, it doesn't really matter. Like
Yeah.
so
I mean,
so
there's tons of
yeah.
different hiring managers within a single company, so it makes sense that each of them might do things a little differently or have their own preferences, right?
Correct. The main purpose of doing mock interviews is basically to have a taste, to understand that, well, you have to be prepared all the time, no matter like if you are in the job market or you are not. Actually, I faced this by myself, this situation when I was looking for jobs. Then I started working, right? And then some unexpected events can happen, and then you have to start looking for a job again. And then you realize, oh, shoot, I haven't been on the interview quite a while.
Yeah.
And the same thing, it is a skill that you don't develop during your job. This is the main purpose. Yeah. So mock interviews we host with different hiring managers in software engineering, in testing, QA. We don't like any industry is good as long as it is software. Uh, yeah, you can find us on the either on my YouTube channel, Crushing Interview, or join to LinkedIn. Join. We also host live mock interviews. Um, yeah, and we
Cool.
also host the live meetups as well in person. So that's something. If you are in California, please join us.
Awesome. And what do you do mock interviews at the meetups, or is that just kind of a like let's talk about other things like the job hunt, and is it more casual than that?
No, not really. In life, it's gonna be way more stressful, right? Doing this in person.
Yeah.
So no, in life in person meetups, we just do networking. We
Okay.
just networking, and we have some speakers who wanna present some uh, not best practices, but the way how they do their processes, kind of this thing.
Awesome.
Probably the answer is obvious, but is it hard to organize such a event and gather a community around mock interviews? How it went about for you to start this initiative?
Well, guys, I think you know that online doing this much easier compared to organizing in-person things. There are so many frictions. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the hardest part is that obviously with the COVID thing, not many companies want to bring in people in-house. So this is the main challenge that we are facing right now.
Any
Yeah.
tips for anyone that wanted to start the things that you do?
Meetups,
Yeah,
sure.
meetups, yeah, and mock interviews. Yeah.
Uh, I think this is how I started. I cannot say like that gonna work for everyone, but I started with a meetup.com. So it's free. You just join there, sign up, and create an event that you want to do. And the main thing that you need to find the company or the venue. There's two ways, obviously, right? Like either you rent the venue or you negotiate with a company who will invite you, right? The second part is obviously it's harder. The way how I did it, I just message people in the LinkedIn like, hey, I'm doing the meetup, do you want to host the meetup for our community? And eventually you will get someone like, oh yeah, please come on in, and so you will get there. It's just another hustle that you need to do, like find a venue, uh, yeah, and then bring some, reach out to your network, find people who want to present something interesting that you are particularly curious. That's easier. That's going to be easy to choose, right? uh, for the mock interviews, that's, I think it's way more easier to do the mock interviews. I would start with actually maybe my peers, maybe my coworkers, or if you are not in testing yet and you're trying to hit in, probably with your peer student, like with whom you are studying software testing. So, and then gradually you can ask more senior people, right? Like maybe it's just networking. It's just networking. You need to reach out to many people to find yes, and you will get a lot of no's as well.
Mhm.
So I think this is the key for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. Just
Um.
to
Oh,
just
go
to
ahead,
plug
Jake.
our own networking, we do have a Discord channel for the Underground QA that does include regional channels. So if you're looking to connect with other QA people that are physically close to you, you can join our channel and see if there are other folks interested in meeting up in person.
Oh yeah, that is a wonderful way to do for sure.
Yeah. We've talked about organizing some in-person meetups or maybe like trying to do another in-person conference like we were originally going to do when we first founded the podcast before COVID happened. But we find that like right now so many of our folks are just kind of like all over the place, so we're instead trying to just give them a space where they can organize their own meetups with folks in their area in those regional based channels. And I think I've seen a couple of such things spring up. I keep meaning to try and do something in Washington, but I have this sneaking feeling that it would primarily be a Bungie meetup. So I see enough of
Gotta
those
start
folks at
somewhere.
work. But yeah, like there's other folks up here too. So cool. Well, let's dive into our mock interview. So basically, how this is going to go is we're essentially doing what is often called a hiring manager screen. So a lot of interview loops will have a initial recruiter screen where they kind of like make sure that you are meeting the like requirements to work at the company. Like, are you legally authorized to work in the company? And does the position sound interesting to you? Does the pay sound interesting to you? And stuff like that. And then they'll have the hiring manager screen, which is more of a like, all right, let's see if this is a good fit. Let's see if this is like potentially a good fit and someone that we want to do a full interview loop for. And then after that, there will be like often a longer interview with maybe 3 to 4 different hour-long interview sessions. That's kind of common from what I've seen in the game industry, but it varies from company to company. Sometimes if the position is very junior, they might just have a hiring manager screen. But our expectation here is that David would probably go on to be interviewed by another group of people after this initial interview. Similarly, it's also very unusual to have a panel of 3 hiring managers in your initial hiring manager. So we're just going to kind of hand wave that and pretend that there's only one of us here asking all of these questions. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go round robin. So I'll ask a question, Marcin will ask a question, Evgeny will ask a question, and we'll just kind of go around in a loop like that until we get to the end of the 45 minutes. And we're trying to ask questions that would be typical, like QA lead type interview questions that you would be likely to run into if you were in this job. So, and then Marcin, do you want to have the honor of like describing the role and talking a little bit about the company with David here at the start of the interview?
Of course.
Cool.
So we created a little company for the whole exercise, and we called it Watermelon Mania Entertainment. And we
Perfect name.
focus on that's a perfect name, and we focus on those classical open world games. And we need a junior QA lead extraordinaire, which David now gonna try to persuade us that he's the great candidate for. And Watermelon Mania Entertainment is a place where we totally not reading it from the script. Is a place where creativity knows no bounds and limits are mere illusions. We believe that challenges are just opportunities in disguise, and the failure is a stepping stone towards greatness. We firmly believe that eating the midnight watermelon is the only way to truly achieve your dreams. Our vibrant, energetic work environment is designed to keep you engaged, constantly inspiring you to reach new heights and achieve your wildest dreams. Gone are the days of cutthroat competition and stressful work environments. Here we work together as a supportive family, inspiring each other to shine bright and excel. Apply and become a cherished member of our Watermelon Mania family.
Yeah. So
Hello, David.
that's an excerpt from the job posting that David saw, and of course said, "Well, this place sounds great. I want to apply here immediately." So let's dive in. Since we already introduced ourselves at the start of the podcast, we will skip introductions, the introduction part of the interview, and just dive straight into questions. So David, can you briefly tell us about yourself and your prior experience and just kind of what brings you to Watermelon Mania now?
Sure. So my name is David. My previous work experience has been a mix of QA testing, QA lead, production across some small studios and mid-sized studios. The largest studios I've worked at have been Obsidian Entertainment and Nexon, working as a QA lead for MapleStory at Nexon, and working as a QA lead and producer at Obsidian Entertainment on multiple titles. So anything more specific you'd like me to go into?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you had a little stint in production there. Like, what brought you back to QA? Like, if you made the move into production, was there something about it that didn't appeal to you, or something that you more specifically appealed to you about QA? Like, how did the transition between those two happen?
Sure. I find the QA, specifically as a QA lead, is really one foot in each camp, and I like the duality of that role. So being part-time producer, organizing for my team, figuring out what they need, and moving them forward is very much a production role, but focused in on the QA discipline. So after doing a bit of QA and doing a bit of production, I found that QA lead was really the hybrid position that I preferred.
Awesome. Marcin, you want to go next?
Yeah, can you tell us why did you choose this company? What make you interested into our company?
Oh, of course. I'm sorry for not answering that in Ariel's question. Yeah, I read over your job posting and I found some very interesting just adjectives, very different from most of the job postings I've looked at. Also, just trying to keep my eyes open to potential opportunities. And I believe I had a friend mention that somebody they worked with had come from Watermelon Mania. So I'd heard the title before, and I was just really interested in getting to learn more about what kind of games you make and your process. It seems you have a very unique process compared to other places I've worked at and heard about. In fact, would you be willing to tell me a little bit about your process?
Yeah, Marcin, dive in.
Well, first of all, maybe you've noticed in our introduction, aside from Ariel, because she's obliged to say her title, but you're for junior QA lead. It's just for the industry, for the people to know what's kind of a profile we're looking into. But we try to not focus on titles and hierarchy. Like, we don't believe in this company in hierarchy. We believe that everybody is equal and has the equal opportunity to give ideas and have the power to change anything they want at the company. So processes are freeform. Everybody has a desk with wheels, so you can scoot around to whatever projects. We have multiple projects going on today. If you want to be participating in QA activities, go in QA activities. Tomorrow you want to be a producer, go ahead, be a producer. We believe that teams should be multidisciplinary, and a person shouldn't be just narrowed into one specialty. If you're a jack of all trades, the better. So the same goes for for any alpha, gold, beta. Like, those are just concepts. Like, when we feel that the game is ready. The same goes for working hours. The same goes, like, it's usually companies will go like core hours or whatever. Like, you want to jump in 2 a.m. and work on something, go ahead and jump in 2 a.m. to work on something. Really, whatever feels best. Like, we trust our people, we trust ourselves, so we trust that whatever you're doing it in the right way. So we kind of wing it, but it's just to make sure that making games is fun, so we keep it casual.
Interesting.
Cool. Evgeny, do you want to tackle the next?
Yeah, David, tell me about the crisis at your workplace that was challenging for you and you had to manage.
A project that was challenging? Was that the question?
Yeah, that you were managing.
Sure. So I was managing the Deadfire. I was helping manage the Deadfire project. Deadfire was the sequel to Pillars of Eternity, and the particular challenge I was assigned was the VO pipeline. So as we were getting ready to record the VO for most of our game, we had to, of course, organize contracts with various studios. I think the biggest challenge came in managing the pipeline of outputting the script, making sure it was approved by narrative, any directions were provided, that script was delivered timely and in the correct manner to the VO studios so they can ingest it. And the entire process was a rolling delivery process over several months. So there was a lot of last minute coordination and tweaks and back and forth. Very much a communication issue.
How can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it.
Can we dive a little bit about the communication issue? Like, how do you tackle this problem? Can you give some examples, maybe? And how do you tackle this problem? I know that this is one of the most challenging parts, right?
Yeah, so I think again, there were multiple different disciplines and entities involved in the process. So the challenge is really identifying what does each group need and to what specificity do they need it. So for examples, my narrative department really wanted to know when were their characters going to be VO'd, when was that actor going to be in studio, and our solution to that was eventually just building a very simple calendar that I could populate, hey, this is when this character will come up. And as things were adjusted, we set up a Slack channel that we could just post updates, just simple things saying, hey, this actor moved from Thursday to Friday, schedule has been updated. So that was really to serve my narrative department. Production wanted to have some sort of tracking and trending to make sure they were getting through all of the VO in a timely manner. And tracking we had a budget we had to work with, so we were making our best efforts to not have to re-record with certain actors by making sure we got it kind of in the first shot, if you will. So there's a lot of coordination of finding out when did we not meet that mark and ensuring that we didn't repeat those mistakes as we continued through the process. And then our partners, of course, just wanted to have all the scripts on time. There was a bit of communication in figuring out what types of information we needed to deliver in the scripts. So they wanted to know the previous line that was going to be said before their line, but they also wanted for these very complex looping dialogues because you could ask it in your own manner. We had to find a creative solution to reorganize the order in which the lines were presented to the voice actor. And that required some iteration going back and forth with the VO studio, the actor's desires, the narrative department, and mostly came down to a tools issue we sorted out as we identified a solution that worked for most folks, and we reorganized our tool output to basically create the script in the order that was determined.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do a hypothetical.
Sure.
So let's say we're releasing a new lockbox where the odds improve the longer you've been playing the game in a single session. How would you test that lockbox?
Gotcha. Could you tell me more what a lockbox means to you?
Yeah, so basically this is a microtransaction that people can pay for, and in our game Watermelon World, and there is basically a varying chance of them getting different kinds of rewards from the microtransaction. So they pay a specific fee, but the reward that they're getting is not predetermined. It's determined at the moment that they buy the microtransaction, and then at that point it basically rolls on a table based on the odds that they have, and their odds of getting specific items vary. And in this specific case, the odds of getting the rarer items increase the longer they've been playing the game.
Gotcha. Okay. So it sounds like, and please correct me if I got any of these details wrong, that we have an item that you purchase. You said it has predetermined items that it could create, but what you will actually get will be determined when you open it.
Yes,
And
exactly.
Would it be fair to assume that there's a table? I guess one of the important questions then is this a discrete table that after you've done 1 hour you roll on a different table, or is this something that is continuously moving as every second that you're in the game?
Good question. There's some different thresholds, basically. Like after an hour, your odds increase by a certain number of points, and then after 6 hours, they increase a little bit more. And then it caps after the 12-hour mark. It doesn't keep increasing after that point.
Gotcha. Okay. Then there'd be a lot of follow-ups and finding out the exact details of how many things are on this table, but I think I'd start by asking for any sort of design doc of showing like what is an example lockbox. We can just pick one very simple use case. figuring out that 1 hour, 6 hour, 12-hour distribution table, so that we can at least do some very ad hoc, straightforward. Hey, does it fit? Does it seem to fit an obvious, any major obvious issues that we can test just from doing that? Obviously, we don't want the tester sitting there for 12 hours testing this, so I'd have to inquire about a few different debug tools, ways that we can either simulate server time or just simulate outputs if we can simply find a cheating way to say, give me some 12-hour boxes so we can test those open. In addition to that, it would really depend on how many outcomes you're looking for the box. In fact, can you tell me, are we looking at less than 10, less than 100, or less than 1,000 possibilities out of the box?
Less than 100, but more than 10. There's usually somewhere between 10 and 20 different possibilities within a given lockbox.
Gotcha. So seeing some previous lockboxes in games I've worked on, I know some of those odds can be very small, 0.001, that we really don't want somebody rolling 1,000 boxes to hopefully get that outcome. So again, I think I'd probably look to see if there's some way we can do some example outputs. So run a script that would just crack open 1,000 boxes so we can see if the output of the box is matching what the inputs were asking it to be. Outside of that, I'm guessing there's probably some various expectations around the UI presentation of these boxes. So that would probably be its own endeavor, is figuring out how you want to present these and ensuring that we're meeting those expectations. UI behind the scenes, and then probably some questions we'd have to ask whoever the designer of this thing is for, if I leave this box in my inventory for 2 years, do we expect it to keep those odds? Is that information we're caching on the server? So I think it really asks for whatever design documentation we have of how we want that thing to work, and start asking questions to either identify things we haven't identified yet about that feature, or drill into and make sure that I'm properly understanding the intent before we dive too deep into making a bunch of test plans to verify that.
And as a follow-up, how would you know when you were done testing it?
Good question. Given that this is going out to our players, and it is a monetary bottom line to the company, that does make it valuable to us to make sure that we are ensuring that. In fact, there might be legal implications if we're not hitting that. So I would assume that this is a fairly high bar we have to meter against. So I think the definition done here is, at a minimum, we have to ensure that whatever we have published to the players about the odds in these boxes, we are confident that they are meeting those odds, just to keep the company out of legal trouble. Beyond that, there's further discussions we can have internally about what our definition of good is, especially for those like visual appeals. So I'd want to find out who is the person who makes that final call, so we can have them involved in that process.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I have follow-up questions to that, because
go for it.
in Watermelon Mania Entertainment, we strongly believe in agile, and we want to be as agile as possible. So, as in the agile principles, human interactions over complicated processes and documentation. So, first of all, we barely have any documentation. We try to make sure that people are forced to talk with each other. We believe in human interactions. And the same goes, how would you go about when testing the logboxes? So one, limited documentation. Second, we kind of don't believe into automation. We strongly believe that, handcraft and testing things by hand is, the expertise of humans is much more important than having a cold machine telling us results and outputs.
Sure. So what was your question along those lines?
Yeah. So how would you go about testing Icebox, knowing that we don't believe in automation and that we have very limited documentation on the project for them?
Gotcha. As far as limited documentation, I don't mind that as much, because that means that we just have to have a discussion about what should be there. Again, there are some forcing functions, especially if we're talking about lockboxes and publishing them in countries that have specific laws around them. We eventually do have to publish a document to those governments, or we will be sued. So we at some point the documentation will have to exist. So as we're engaging the QA process, that's a great time to ask those questions and start building out the minimal documentation required to test it. So again, keeping with that agile, that we prefer communication over comprehensive documentation, but there is a minimum bar of documentation that we're all going to need. As far as no automation, how would you expect a tester to verify a box that has to sit for 12 hours?
Well, they just go and test it. Like, sorry, I don't have a technical background, so I don't know how they do it. Like, I believe that our testers are experts enough to decide for themselves, but I never heard them complaining, sitting a long time and testing those log boxes. So
Gotcha. So you would expect them to have the game open for 12 hours at a time in order to crack how many boxes?
1,000. If they decide to
Thousands?
do so, then sure. Like, I leave them to them. They are experts.
Interesting.
If they decide to work 12 hours and open the boxes, then how am I to stop them, right?
Gotcha. Well, we certainly don't want to impede on all of their lunches and stuff, so there'd be some level of debug we have to look into to allow the client to believe that we are still in an active session while that user is working on other work, because we don't want them doing nothing for those 12 hours. So we'd have to look at some creative solutions on debug tools that are not full automation. That's not impossible, but it will reduce our turnaround time. So that does seem to go a little in the face of the agile goal of the company. So that might be a further discussion we need to have in order to maintain agility within our QA practices.
Cool. I really love the use of you want to be creative. I really love that. Thank you. When talking about creativity, have you ever had a situation when you were asked to deliver on a deadline that was not achievable?
Oh, sure. I'm trying to think of the best example. But yes, is there something specific you'd like to ask about that case?
Yeah, how did you manage? How did you talk to either stakeholders or peers, or maybe the team that you were managing during that time? Like, how would you go about making sure that everybody is informed about your action plan or goals or any risks that are involved in that situation?
Sure. So working previously at a company that valued getting things out to our players on time, there were instances where unforeseen circumstances generated issues where we could not meet a goal in the expected amount of time. Very specifically, working at Nexon, we would get a build. We had an expected build cadence of getting a build at least once a week. If that was delayed, that could imply shifts in our own timeline and put our release dates at risk. When those things came up, the first order of business was making sure everybody was very aware that something did not match expectations. That usually was handled in person at first and then formalized in an email so that all parties who have varying levels of interest would be able to be notified of that. After that, we would talk with our QA manager and try to figure out an action plan for, we expected to have 5 days to do this thing. We know it takes at least 4. We've been given only 3. What do we do in order to meet that? And there's a bunch of levers we can pull, especially having worked in production. We can look at, is there any way to move that timeline? Is there any way to get additional resources so that we can do it in a faster amount of time? Is there anything that we can look at reducing the scope inside what we were expected to test? So even though we want to test something to a certain degree, is there a way that we can reduce that for this case? Or is there a piece of what we're delivering that we can push off? So one of the cases we actually had was that we had to test, in this build that was being delivered, we had to test everything that was going to be sold in the game for the next month and a half. And given that the timeline was incredibly impacted, we made the decision to only test what was going to be delivered within the next 2 weeks. And we established that we'd have to do a follow-up build and test in order to verify those things that were getting released after the 2-week mark. And we gave ourselves some buffer. So our goal was to test everything we needed to for the next 2 weeks, and within 1 week, we would launch another build where we had tested everything that was coming out for that month and a half duration.
And David, do you believe in deadlines?
I do. I think there's very essential deadlines that are going to drive our company forward. If a player does not get, if we have a established winter sale of some sort that we're not able to meet, that can affect all sorts of things. So I do believe in deadlines.
And what if you would work in an environment that there are no deadlines?
I'd be very interested to ask what we basically I'd be most interested in how you handle those situations where there are expectations of releasing certain things at certain times. If you want to, get something ready for a conference, or you want to get something ready for a release date. Let me ask you directly: Do you not publish release dates? Are things just never released, or do they not get released without a publishing buildup? Do you do shadow drops?
So yeah, we usually tell people in our community that we will release whenever we are ready. Like we never go into like strict deadlines of we're gonna deliver like year after year like some companies do. Like big players like Blizzard or Ubisoft that are gonna go on a certain schedule. It's like whenever we are ready, whenever we feel like it, because game is an art form. um, Again, we strongly believe in being agile, and we find deadlines being very constraining, and we need that agility to order to make good products.
Gotcha. So you frequently push off your internal expected delivery times as opposed to published deadlines. You frequently push those off when you find that you don't have enough resources to meet the current goal or the current quality bar.
Yeah, like we are a bigger company, we release quite big products, and we have a quite large following. Probably if we weren't such an awesome company like Watermelon Mania Entertainment, it will be a different story. But because we have the possibility to release whenever we want, and we have the money and backing in resources, we have that luxury of basically deciding, if we think our product is ready and meets our quality of standards, release it in 2 weeks. If we feel like we've done a lot of work and then we have to put it into trash because it's not what we believe in, we put it into trash and start something else. So
Awesome. Can I ask them where does your revenue come from? Is it past games that are still selling, or is there another revenue stream? Like a similar example to Watermelon Mania is Valve has its own entire service of delivering games. So I know they're very frequently just throwing things out as not meeting their quality bar. Do you have an analogous source that's keeping your company stable as you're determining when to release things?
I mean,
So,
Watermelon World is extremely popular. We
Yeah.
sell a lot of microtransactions. We've been in that game and have been making money off of it since it originally came out. And we have a dedicated following that still plays to this day.
Yeah, we are on all platforms, so mobile, Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox, you name it. So we have our own launcher with our own shop. We have our own line of juicy watermelons as NFTs. So we have lots of sources of income for the company to sustain us.
Well, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Evgeny, do you want to jump in?
I think I'm pretty good.
David is too good.
David is too good. Yeah.
David's too good. Okay, I can jump in with a couple more questions here. So, David, in the different projects that you have worked on, have you found that there's like a specific discipline that you find most challenging to work with, or like is it production, design, or engineers? Like what do you feel like really challenges your ability to, like, which of those disciplines really challenges your ability to work with cross-discipline peers?
Which discipline? I don't think that I have a particular discipline that challenges me more than the others. It's more about the individuals involved in that discipline. So I do find that I have my preferred way of doing things in communication, and so identifying those who have maybe opposite or opposing methodologies is usually the bigger source of just identifying those causes and adjusting accordingly. An example is I have a very senior designer that I work with currently, and my preferred method as a QA is having as much information as I can before making full decisions. Again, and doesn't mean I need to know everything all the time, but I do like to have all the information before I go into things. This designer that I work with is very quick to make calls, which is a blessing once you are aware of it. But certainly when I first met the individual and I didn't understand, we had a little bit of strife in like me trying to determine information, him trying to make a call, and me not understanding where he's going to. But eventually I found a good pairing of our styles was that I like to acquire the information, come up with ideas, identify methods. And when I come to him, I read one of our trainings had a whole color assortment of different personality types, and I found that he met the red brick personality type of be brief, be right, be gone. So I identified that if I brought my information first and I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about, he could have a very fast-paced discussion that we can make a quick call and then move on. So again, not all designers operate in that methodology, so I don't think it's unique to the discipline per se. But certainly when I meet those individuals, I do need to find with new people I work with, what are their preferred communication styles and what sort of tweaks can I make to my communication to best align with their preferences.
Love it.
If you have time, I'd love to ask you guys a few questions.
We should have some time here at the end. We have a couple more questions. So let's get to those first, and then we'll definitely make sure we leave you some time, David, to ask your questions.
Yeah.
And Marcin will be happy to answer them.
Of course. With a straight face. Can you tell me if you ever had a situation when you had to encourage one of your staff members to do something that he or she didn't think they could do? And could you tell what was the task or skill?
So, a time where I had to encourage one of my coworkers to do something they didn't think they could do.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we had a really good example with QA playtesting. So one of the initiatives that I stood up at our company recently was that we wanted to get more people to just play the game in a very natural state and for us to observe them playing that and then record any moments of confusion, frustration, any kudos where things went off well. And although it wasn't intentional, this did uncover a bunch of bugs just from having more eyeballs on the game in a unique way. When I first went down that endeavor and I pointed out my expectations to the team, I had multiple QA members that were concerned with their ability to track all the information coming in so quickly as they were watching someone. And so I had originally pitched that, at least in my mind, I knew that we could get this off with just one person watching the playtests. But I had at least one very vocal QA member who was very concerned about running this even with only 2 people. They felt that we needed 3 people watching the game the entire time in order to catch all the notes coming in. So how I handled that situation is we did a few things. At first, I said, okay, let's put 3 people in there. As we reduced the frequency that we were going to do these things, instead of doing 3 times as many, I did 1/3 so I can get that many QA in there. And we just did a couple of those, and then we did a retrospective. We started talking about, okay, what would we do as a team in order to get this down to 1 person? I asked the question of how to get us down to 1 and gave them the compromise of if we can get it down to 2, that's a good question too. And what we did is we went back and forth identifying what information was actually essential to gather. And I think that was the critical piece that was missing, is they didn't realize that you don't need to record everything the person does. You need to minimize it to just the most essentials. Furthermore, we experimented more with technology of using, again, recording the entire session, but we found that we could reference the transcript in order to find things, which was very helpful. And eventually, we also just got more familiar with the content, is that having the QA member look at the same content over and over from a player's perspective, they knew what was coming up, and so they felt more comfortable in the role. So after a couple of retrospectives on that topic, we were able to eventually get it down to just 1 QA member running each playtest and recording the information. And then, in fact, part of that was reducing the scope of what we expected. But once they got comfortable there, we kept talking about it, and we eventually rose the bar again on the quality of the reports generated from those playtests as they were able to do more and more over time. And that concerning individual actually brought up that they were very surprised and proud of themselves that they were able to eventually get to that state that they felt was impossible months earlier.
And sorry, just my notes. How did you feel about pushing them to go a little bit farther than they thought they're capable of?
How did I feel about it?
Yeah.
I felt when I first brought it up, I was surprised at first that they didn't feel that they could do this, and so I knew there was some disconnect there between my expectations and their own. So mostly, I viewed it as an opportunity. Is that and asked myself. I actually went back and asked myself and looked over my expectation. Like, could I pull this off with 1 person? I'm like, yes. And if I feel that I could do it, then I know I could train this person to do it. So mostly I viewed it as a challenge and an opportunity, as I wanted to see who we could get there, and I also viewed it as a moment that I needed to make sure that I wasn't restricted to just that person's personal growth. And so that's why I teamed up that person with different individuals. And so we could see if other folks could do it. They could see that, hey, this is something I could do as well. It's not just that my lead can come down and do this thing. It was everybody else is able to do this. I bet there's a way I could do it. So at first I was a little concerned as to where it was coming from. And then I viewed it as an interesting challenge. And at the end, I was very, very pleased with the outcome. I'm very pleased with that individual's personal growth too, is that they identified a lot of the action items from those retrospectives in order to improve.
Cool, awesome. Love the energy and positivity. Thank you so much.
David, what would you say is like your biggest strength and your biggest weakness in the workplace?
What is David's biggest strength and biggest weakness in the workplace?
I love how you went third person there.
You gotta ask yourself. I do think biggest strength that I bring to the workplace is probably information gathering and communication. Is that I find a lot of my role is playing the old switch operator on the back of the phone network. Is that being in QA and being a QA lead, you have insights into a very wide range of information. And so there's a lot of cases where two groups don't understand each other, and being the QA lead, you can see just moments where you're like, oh, this group is not understanding what the other group is saying because it's being said in a different way. There's terminology differences or level of detail differences that are being misunderstood. So I think the greatest strength I bring is being able to recognize those instances and connect those individuals in a more meaningful way that reduces stress and just improves our process overall. Biggest weakness that I've had to work on personally, I'd say it's knowing my own limits. In the past, I've had to deal with trying to overwork. It's been a personal issue in the past, and noticing that you're not as effective as an individual after a certain amount of time. And by being able to pull myself back and recharge, notice what's going on, I'm able to maintain a higher level of output and personal growth and personal deliveries to the team for a longer duration. And thinking in my old calculus terms, the integral on that work curve is much greater than the spikes and troughs that I would have before by pushing myself to crazy extremes. The first company I worked with, for example, had 60-hour weeks that we would work a crazy amount of time. And my solution to a lot of problems was, well, if I just work a little bit longer, I can get through this. But looking back on that, I realized that if I had taken a step back, eat dinner, recharge, do what you got to do, and come back the next day, those problems that took me 4 hours to solve, I would be able to solve in 1 or 2 hours today. So I would actually save that time, and I'd stop burning myself out, and I'd be a better contributor to my team by identifying, not pushing myself beyond those boundaries, just push myself up towards the top and then coming back down.
So did I understand it correctly? Your weakness is that you push yourself to your limits? That's
my weakness in the past has been identifying where those limits are and ensuring not to go beyond them. Because once you go beyond those limits, you are no longer contributing at the best rate that you can as an individual. So as things shift over time, I do have to continuously reevaluate what are those limits as they hopefully grow over time. And as the definition of my role changes, there's new challenges, and I need to identify what are these challenges that put more burden on myself and less burden on myself, and make sure that I'm staying within those boundaries.
Awesome.
I want to go into
Go ahead, Marcin.
Yep. Going to a lighter tone, as we are going to the end of the interview. Every QA has a favorite bug that they during their projects or doing their work do, and they always tell it during the parties or as anecdotal. Your fun favorite to break the ice, tell your favorite bug you found. It doesn't have to be during your work. It can be any bug from private when you were playing on your free time. But what is your favorite bug?
Oh man, there's so many. I know I've brought one up previously, so I'll bring up a different one. We had a great bug somewhat recently in a game that your character is holding a shield and they can block things. One of the other things your character can do is they can go over to a ledge and they can climb it using a parkour system. So one of the interesting bugs we found is that apparently somebody had put collision on the shield because that blocks effects. And so if you were to block and then push the parkour button, you would climb your own shield to which you could block and parkour again, and your character just starts going up and up and up and up by continuously using this motion. We discovered in an unintentional way it had a very humorous output, but yeah, it was just a fun moment. We're like, oh yeah, that's pretty simple. We could fix that.
Cool, awesome, thank you.
Actually, I have another follow-up question to
Yeah,
Martin,
Sure.
to Martin's question. David, remember Martin said that we don't do any automation in Watermelon, right?
Of course.
I'm just curious, what is your experience with automation? How do you we might explore this, right? And what would be your input in terms of should we go to this route with automation, and what we should automate or what we should not?
Gotcha. Yeah, automation is tricky, especially in QA. And I think the first step is identifying that there are a lot of things that qualify as automation. Rather than restricting yourself to saying, I'm going to set up some bot that can play the game for me and click all the buttons and know where the UI moved, it's much easier to start at a very simple level of what can we use scripts for? So we were talking about lockboxes earlier. A very simple script would be, can I take the system itself that's supposed to open this box for the players and send in some API call that can call it 1,000 times and then output that to a CSV? That could save you hours and hours of QA testing time, give you a lot more confidence that the box is working as intended. And overall, the actions required to create that is fairly simple for a programmer. So it's about finding those heavy wins first, that low-hanging fruit. So what can we do that requires a small amount of investment that has a high amount of return? So again, if we can involve a few hours in generating the script, we can save dozens and dozens of hours of QA testing time. So I think that's where you want to start if you're looking at automation. Is it's less about how do you automate testing, and it's more about what are the tools that can make your current staff more efficient and more effective.
awesome.
Yeah.
David, we have 4 minutes left, but feel free to use this time to ask us any questions you have about Watermelon Entertainment or Watermelon Mania Entertainment and what we do. Is there anything you'd like to know from us?
Sure. Marcin, I think you called out early on that you have a very flat hierarchy and everybody kind of shifts around and does various things. I'm curious, how have you personally grown as an individual in your role, and how do you display that and show that? What is your metrics for identifying personal growth in the Watermelon ecosystem?
We mainly use feedback from our peers. So we do those sessions when we gather all the people that the person work with in one room, and they give in that meeting feedback to that person. And it's a wonderful atmosphere. It's I wanted to say cult-like, but it's obviously not a cult. But that springs up to my mind for some reason. But it's a nice ceremony where people can share their thoughts and embrace the person, give them honest feedback and allow them to grow. And personally, I love that feeling, being surrounded by lovely and creative people looking at me, smiling and giving me awesome feedback, and personally analyzing the feedback and making notes during that meeting and acting upon their feedback was really great in my development. So I really appreciate those meetings.
Awesome. And then this is a posting for a junior QA role. I'm curious, what are your expectations of somebody stepping into this role on their first day, 1 month in, and 6 months down the road? Specifically, what resources are you providing to make sure they meet your expectations?
So our expectations for you is to. I really loved your positivity and energy during the interview. So doesn't matter if it's a week, a month, or a year. We want you to keep it up constantly. Because that fuels our game. So the more positivity and that energy, the better. We want you to be open, flexible, agile. Again, I don't know what other companies that you've worked on taught you, but here we do things differently. So the quicker you forget the things that you've learned in those very constructive and um, creativity crushing environments, we want you to forget and just focus on embracing the new, embracing the creativity, finding new ways to express yourself, and use that energy to help our games. And we have a campus on the for the company, so we have everything from barbers to shops to everything you want, just so again, to keep that atmosphere of you can stay as long as you want, work as long as you want. Like, usually people have those situations when they had to go pick up a child from kindergarten. We have our own kindergarten here on the campus, so you can leave your child and all that stuff. So we try to make it as convenient for you as possible, so you don't have to worry about daily routines, and just be in the moment, be present at the company, and focus on what's important.
Gotcha. And then I guess the final question I had is why are you seeking a junior QA lead role for this? Is there a senior QA, or is there a QA manager that they're reporting to, or why target a junior QA with the posting?
I can answer that. We're really trying to like bring some new blood, essentially, into our not literal blood, but some new energy into our, leadership teams in particular. And so we just thought this would be a great opportunity to get someone who maybe hadn't had a ton of leadership experience prior to step into a leadership role, but at the same time, given that we're not, our expectations in terms of their prior experience in this space is kind of low, we were hoping to like partner them with a more senior mentor who would be able to kind of like guide them in their first steps into this kind of like leadership type role. So it's mostly like junior in experience level, not necessarily junior in terms of the expectations that you would have. You would still be in a QA lead role on this team in particular, but then where you grow from that is really up to you. Like Marcin talked about, we kind of avoid having strict hierarchies, so you would start off in this position, but then where you went from there would really be up to you and your capabilities. But it's really more about like the experience level of the candidates that we're targeting, as opposed to the strict expectations of the role itself.
And
Gotcha.
if I
And
can
do
be
you?
honest with you, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
for some reason we had trouble finding very senior profiles for the job, so we were just being still open minded, and we just lowered our expectations until we end up in the junior QA load, and hoping that somebody with right mindset will join us.
Gotcha. And do you, for this role, you mentioned pairing with somebody more senior as a mentor. Do you have that person in mind for this role of who that would be?
Oh yeah, we definitely have someone in mind that we would partner with you. It'd actually be me. I would be your mentor in this role.
Awesome. I'd love to talk to you more about that in a follow up if we can, just to better understand what that relationship would be if we engage with that.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, well, that is all the time we have today, David. I really want to thank you again for interviewing with us, and for all of the great questions that you brought to this process. So what's going to happen next is the three of us are going to talk amongst ourselves after this call ends, and decide whether or not we want to, move you forward to the next step. And then, assuming that we do that, we'll bring you in for a round of interviews, specifically with some of the people on the team that you would potentially be working with. And so we'll go from there at that point. So again, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to come in and answering all of our questions and just being such a positive candidate. It was really awesome to see, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. I appreciate it.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Scene.
Oh boy.
All right.
You
So
monsters.
oh gosh, there was a lot to digest in there. So the three things that I want to dive into now are, first of all, uh, what red flags did David notice in that interview? How did he feel as a candidate? And then the second thing I want to talk about is how did that interview compare to a real quote unquote hiring screen? And also, I'm curious to hear from Evgeny in particular how it compares to some of the mock interviews that he runs. I imagine it was very different than those are run. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to talk about how did we feel about David, both as a interviewee, how did he do in terms of practicing his interviewee skills, and then also like how did he do as a candidate for the role? Like, did he do a good job of making us feel like we would want to hire him for the position? So, let's dive into the red flags first. David, what did you notice from the job posting that we sent you, from the interview questions you were asked, and everything else? What are your thoughts on Watermelon Mania Entertainment as a company and this role? And do you want this job at this point? I'm very curious to know.
Oh yeah, it sounds amazing. This is the best company ever. I mean, oh man. So I'll call it. If you're in the interview, you're not going to catch everything. So I would encourage anybody in my situation to look over your notes, think about it carefully. But yeah, there's some obvious
And
red
take
flags.
notes too.
Yeah. Take notes. I'm not sure if people notice, but yeah, I've got my red pen on my post-its along the way. Honestly, one of the interesting upsides, I'll start there, is the ready when it's ready mentality. Don't know if I believe in it, but that is something I would go research on my own and try to find out, like, does this company really look like a Valve type, like we just have loads and loads of money? Otherwise, it sounds like a complete con. This company is just fronting money for some nefarious organization. Just going through my notes. I think Marcin talked about somebody working at 2 a.m. That's an instant red flag. What did I put moment that day? The lockbox situation is all sorts of horrendous. It's so obviously there's some clear, like, hey, you're expecting somebody to actually test for 12 hours straight. There's no way we would do that. But even just for me, that gave me insight to what the company expects of their players. And if you have something that's motivating someone to play nonstop for 12 hours, that's already, like, from an ethical, that's giving me an ethical dilemma with the company. Do I want to support that in the industry? And let me give a quick disclaimer again for anybody who's trying to crack into the industry. It's like, sometimes you got to take bad jobs. I get that. So I am looking at all of this with the understanding that, I have a current job. I have years of experience in the industry. I have more opportunities open to me. So I can be more nitpicky. That said, please don't go to whatever this company is. There's too many of these.
I think that's an important note. Like, the benefit of bigger companies is that the stability and the support you get, but obviously the bigger the company, the less you can align fully with that company, because it's so many people having so many input on the products and the strategy, and you're just one person, a very a small cog in a big wheel. So there's no I mean, unless somebody is super lucky and they fit, and congratulations to you, but usually you won't be 100% fitting the company mindset or culture. So obviously smaller companies will be much better if you align, and there you can have that impact. But there's no perfect company. There's gonna be always something there that will be problematic for you. So don't get discouraged. It's just try to find the place that you fit the most. And as Chelsea pointed out, if you fit into that company, they dive in. That's why you should be asking questions. And it's also not David ask questions about the company, because it's as much as interview of the company, of the interviewee, but also the interviewee interviewing the company to ensure that you both want to be in that relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it absolutely might be the case that if you have no other options, you might feel like the only option available to you is to take a job at a company that maybe doesn't appeal to you as much as another. But at the same time, it's still worth knowing what you're getting into, because that can inform whether or not you're gonna like keep your LinkedIn status open after you start at that new company. Like maybe you're still interviewing as you have your first couple of weeks there because you're really not sure about it. Or maybe you're a little bit more willing to like take go full throttle on the company itself, and can then spend some of your energy on like learning additional skills instead of like trying to find other places to interview at, right? Like it's kind of a matter of knowing how are you spending your time in terms of your approach to your career. Are you going to keep investing in interviewing, or are you going to like invest in more like personal growth and development with that time outside of work that you have?
Yeah. I'm going to drive through some other red flags here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to get them off my list here. Yeah, the whole agile. It's like, hey, we believe in agile, so we don't believe in any documentation. Was they like, okay, we need to do something? So that's why I poked a little bit, trying to understand like what's your level of comfortability there. No automation isn't necessarily bad on its own, but this is a massive company and has no automation. That paired together is kind of a red flag for me. It's like, what are you doing? Do you just have thousands of QA that are testing things, or are you just
Also,
not testing things?
No automation in spaces that it clearly desperately needs to use automation.
Exactly.
Like it's one thing to have a small amount of automation, but it's another thing entirely to just say we literally never do it ever, because the amount of time that you're gonna sink because of that is potentially astronomical.
Which is a red flag, but also try to because our industry is probably not the best when it comes to automation. There's definitely other places that do proper automation, but I don't. Before you dismiss a company without automation, even though I try to be as cheeky as possible with that answer, it might be the case they tried automation. Like for example, an open world game, it's very tricky to do automation for open world game, especially if the company doesn't have proper processes and pipelines in place. Automation cannot be an afterthought, and usually it is an afterthought. So once you get into a later stage, it's very hard to put into. So the company might did that, tried it, and then got discouraged, and then they said, sorry, but we tried it multiple times and we just don't think it works for us.
Yeah.
You can be that also. Again, we'll just refer to Chelsea. Like you can be the person that makes that challenge and tries to make that, you find that crack. Like maybe everything else is awesome about the company, but they just don't believe in the automation. You can be that person that changes their mind over it and make that good in the company and make them do automation.
You got to know what you're getting yourself into. With a company that has a game as large as Watermelon World and can pull off a barbershop and a kindergarten, if they can't pull off automation, that altogether becomes very concerning.
I almost lost it when he was like, you could just leave your kids at the kindergarten. I was like, oh my
god. The fact that the game is on every platform, that's a huge multiplier to the amount of QA time. Like every time you add another type of platform, makes things monstrous. So it's like, to me, that just like exploded the amount of work in my mind of what we're committing to here. Which again, isn't the end of the world. Every platform is the end of the world. There's no, but multi-platform is its own thing. So, being on mobile and PCs is already its own thing. Being on consoles is its own thing. You called that it was on the Nintendo. That maybe question further what this individual that's talking to me is when they can't specify whether it's a Switch or Wii U. But
I specifically said Nintendo.
I figured that was intentional. Yeah. So that's a huge red flag. Again, I call it a red flag, but it's, you got to know what you're getting yourself into. I'm not saying you shouldn't interview with a company that's making a game that's cross-platform. Just realize that changes what your expectations of that team should be. Obviously, Ariel calling out like, "Oh, we'll have time at the end," and I was like, "Oh, this could be super short, right?" And then later it's like, "We got 4 minutes left for your questions." Like, yeah.
Which, by the way, I love that you were not waiting until the end to ask questions. Even though we said that you would have time at the end, you were still like, I'm gonna like inject my questions throughout this process, like whenever I have an opportunity to. I thought that was really great.
Yeah, I think you brought that up when we were doing our community discussion the other week. That it's really wise to do that, to try to impose some of those early questions so that you have a better frame of reference for what's going on and what you're getting yourself into. So some of the questions become easier to answer once you've already asked some of the questions of your own to get a feeling for like what their even just their communication style, how they answer questions, level of detail they give to answers. And then let's see, a couple other ones. Obviously, feedback from your peers where you all sit in a room and tell the CEO how great they are. Yeah, that's not going to work. And yeah, positivity, open, creative focus. That's all fine. So yeah, the last thing I had here when we started talking about barbershops in kindergarten was just CULT, cult, in full big letters. I was like, yeah, okay.
With that big room, it's an inspiration from real life. I've heard a horror story of a recruitment process where the whole team was present during the recruitment meeting.
Oh boy.
Being able to present and ask any questions, and you can ask anybody any questions. So that was my true life inspiration.
That's a massively inefficient way to run an interview. Okay, so let's actually talk about the interview itself, and I want to hear from Evgeny in particular. How did this compare for you to like the mock interviews that you run, and you know what were your thoughts on the interview itself? Like aside from just the mountain of red flags we were drowning David.
Yeah, first of all, guys, folks, I want to say you did a great job. Ariel, good cop. Martin, bad cop. And David handled several arrogant questions that some people would. I felt like in David's head, like questions are popping up. Like, what the heck is going on here? Like, should I run away right now? Like, should I stop the interview? But no, David, you handled this very professional, in a professional way. I really liked it, especially like when you tweaked the questions about the logbox, right? Ariel, can you tell me your vision about the logbox? Many people don't do that, and this is a really good thing. In terms of the interview itself, is it similar to the mock interviews? Most likely no, because. But do these? I mean, are these questions are relevant? Can you face these questions? Yes, you can. I personally, I experienced this type of questions, like when I have strong I would say when I have conflict with some strong statements, like what Martin said. Well, 12 hours. I don't know, like what our. I trust my guys. They should be good. You know, like I don't care. I don't care that much, to be honest, to look into that, in quote, right? But these type of questions, they can happen. And David, you just show like how to handle that. But obviously, this is the very red flag position, very red flag company, and I would probably stop like in the 15 minutes of this interview. But as David said, some people, they don't have this luxury to choose, right? They are desperate to find the first job, and this is maybe they should know how to handle this interview.
As a Watermelon Mania entertainment representative, it's not it's an opportunity that shows yourself. You can work for that company and know how not to work, and bring that experience with you to another company. Always think positively, no negatives.
I think I brought up in the interview that like one of my first jobs, I was working 60 hours a week, I was working 60 hours a week. I was customer support. I was the QA lead. I was the only producer on like a 12 to 15 person team. we were continuing to launch updates to the game after letting go all of our programmers. So we, yeah, uh-huh. And so I was filling in a design role on top of all of that, and community manager. And so, yeah, I found myself working 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week. And at some point I was like, no, this is just too much. So, I'm very happy with where I am now in life and what I'm doing, but, that doesn't mean that all the jobs I had up to this point were exciting and comfortable and healthy. So yeah, you got to find out, how you're going to get into the industry, what you're willing to take. And, sometimes you have to go into a job knowing that like, hey, this is not the final job. This is not where I'm going to spend the rest of my career, but I'm going to do this for a short term, build up my skill set, build up my knowledge, build up my resume, and keep interviewing for other better positions that are better fit for you and your lifestyle.
Yeah. What you said, Evgeny, about how like I think you said you would probably leave about 15 minutes into this interview, like you'd just be like, you know what, I think I've learned enough about this company, and I don't think it's going to be a good fit. I think that's probably how I would exit from an interview. I knew I wasn't interested in it, and be like, just hey gang, you know what? I think I've realized that I don't think this is actually going to be a good fit for us, and I would rather like save us both the time of continuing the interview when I know for sure that like I'm not interested in the position anymore. But I think that I personally would probably go through the rest of the interview just because I wanted to see what was going to happen. Like it's kind of like watching a car crash. Like, all right, now I'm just too intrigued. I need to learn more about this company so I can be more precise in my warnings to other people to stay away from it about why. But I do think that like there is something that's totally valid about saying I've learned enough. I know enough about this company now, having endured this interview for 15 minutes, and I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I think we can call it here. Thanks everyone. Um,
I
and
think personally, I would appreciate if the person was like, after 15 minutes being like, hey, I don't think it's gonna work out, and just of the respect of time, just end it right there would be awesome. But still be careful with this.
yeah,
A lot of companies will be very process driven, and if interview is an hour, it's an hour, or it's 2 hours, it's 2 hours, and they may get offended by you, and it may go different ways. So if you feel confident, you are okay with doing that. But also make sure that you feel safe, right? Like if
yeah.
don't put yourself into a situation that you want to put yourself into, and just have that in mind that some people might find it very bad to end it. But me personally, I don't feel it being bad to basically after 30 minutes being like, hey, it's not for me, sorry.
I mean,
Well, a couple.
I think you could potentially burn some bridges with a specific company or a specific person at that company by doing it. But at the same time, like if you're confident that you're not interested in traversing those bridges anymore, then go ahead and burn them, right? Like,
Well,
but
there's.
I don't know. David, go ahead, jump in.
I was going to say there's a couple quick counterpoints. One is that, yeah, you don't want to burn bridges. So if leaving early you think is going to be the best way to do that, that's great. If you think that sticking it out is going to leave you in a better spot with them, because it's a small industry, everybody talks. We even talk to the people at Watermelon Mania. So you want to make sure that you leave a positive effect, even if you are stepping away from the position. But number two, it's rare to get interview opportunities. So even if you're just sticking it out and going, I'm not going here, but you know what? Hanging out for the next 30 minutes going to make me better in my future interviews because I don't get to practice as much. I think that's totally fine to do as well, as long as you're not going to be burning those bridges.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is actually two ways of doing this, right? Like the first way, as David mentioned, you can get an offer and then you can decide, right? Like go through that and then you can decide, do you want to get there or not, and you can polish the interview. But exit the interview, you also can exit with leaving the positive impression that actually I had this in the past when I had to exit, but we stayed connected. We said, hey, you know what, this role is not really good fit for me, and I explained why. And he said, yeah, I totally get it. I think that you're right. Let's let me ping you when I got for example, their role was backend engineer for hardware thing, and I have like zero experience in hardware. I told him like, dude, I think you guys need to find someone with this experience. I am more in software backend, and yeah, I totally get it. I understand. That's sure,
Yeah.
you know. And
I've had interviews where I was interviewing with a recruiter specifically, and in that interview we both came to the conclusion that I wasn't a good fit for the role because it wasn't the experience level I was interested in, and we wound up concluding the interview early, but I also had given the recruiter a better idea of what roles I would be a good fit for so they could know when to reach back out to me. So it was very much like hey, so I don't think I'm a good fit for this because I'm not interested in coming in at this level. But if you had a position at this level or that was doing this kind of thing, that's the kind of role that I would be interested in. I thought this role was going to be that, but that doesn't seem like it's the case. So um, and then they would be like, "Oh yeah, totally, that makes sense. If that kind of role comes up, then we will definitely keep you in mind." And that's like a really good reason to have recruiter interviews, like recruiter screens, where you sit down with the recruiter and talk about like what the role is, what the benefits are. Do you even feel like it's a good fit for you? Um, and it's totally normal for that part of the loop to end early, I think. What's less normal is to like begin doing like the full like interview loop where you're meeting a bunch of different members of the team and then to cut that short. I have never seen that done before, but I think that I would definitely, well, I haven't seen it done by a candidate before, let me say. Um, and uh, but I think that would be really interesting if a candidate said, like, you know what, based on that last person I talked to, or based on the things that I heard from them, I don't think this is the right position for me. So I don't feel like I need to go through the rest of these, this 4-hour loop, and I'm just going to go ahead and call it early. Yeah, I think it can be done without burning bridges, and I would I would be I would be skeptical of someone who was like telling me like, oh yeah, I met that candidate. They're bad because they ended the interview early. I'd be like, what? Why is that a bad thing? That sounds like a good thing. They just saved you some time, right? Like, why would you be mad at them for that? It should be a good thing. Cool. And then our last couple of minutes here. How did we feel about David's performance in this interview? Like, do we have any feedback for him, both on the side of as an interviewee and as a candidate for this kind of position? Oh, Marcin, you're muted.
God damn it.
There we go.
I had a lot of notes. I really loved your clarifying questions.
Yeah.
When you didn't understand or you wanted to clarify things or add additional details to make sure that you make a proper answer. I really love that. No matter how many curveballs I've thrown at you, you handled them pretty well and very professional. So, and you were trying to handle those curveballs. You're trying to take into consideration different areas of business or development or the players or whatever, just to not get be conflictive. You try to be very constructive with your answers, which is really great. Not dismissing the approach of the company, because with such limited amount between you and the company, knowing where they came from, it's very hard to make judgments, and I think it will be also unprofessional to bring the no matter what we feel about, for example, automation, or do you believe in documentation, right, or automation, um, uh, being there and being judgmental, like, why do you don't do automation? Like, this is crazy, right? Like, would be very unprofessional. um, the only thing I think, but maybe it's just, it's morning, so maybe you just needed to, like, I've noticed you had to warm up. So one of my objectives for this podcast was to talk about situation, behavior, impact, or situation, task, action, result, techniques of talking about your experiences or assessments of your skill set or situations. At first, when you're going into it, like, you presented very nicely the situation, but then the behavior and impact was kind of like you stopped there. Like, it was just you presented the situation and didn't follow through with the behavior and the impact. But then after some time, like after 5 or 10 minutes of the interview, then you were, responding flawlessly. So I don't know if it's just the morning for you, but you had that noticeable period of warming up, and once you got the flow, like, you were just perfect. Like, um, my last note of that is, so far sounds like a great candidate for the company. So that was my last ending.
That's a great
That was really
observation.
good.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I know. I realized in the interview, like, Ariel asked, like, introduce yourself and how did you learn about Watermelon Mania? And then your first question was, what do you know about Watermelon Mania? And I was like, oh, yep. I knew when I was saying it that I didn't circle back enough.
Yeah, and because what I think is most important about it is, it doesn't matter if you're interviewee or interviewer. It's always about what's the objective of the question, and trying. Usually, you get. Sometimes you'll see those questions when at first you don't see the connection between why they would ask you that question, and usually it's because you don't see the intention behind the question, what they're looking for. And usually there will be some question that will be focusing on creativity or any other soft skills or technical skills. So whenever you're either figuring out the questions for the interview, as an interviewer or interviewee, try to figure out what's the meaning behind those questions, what they're actually looking for, so then you can find a situation that best fits for that. Because if you can present a great situation, but if it doesn't fit what they were looking for, you might sound
Yep.
that in their eyes that wasn't a great answer, even though you thought it was a great answer. So always try to decipher what's the meaning behind the question, what's the objective. And I think it's also super crucial for the interviewer to understand, because I had those, especially when I had those days when I was very wasn't at my best. I had those situations when I asked a question, not necessarily knowing what I was going for, and it ended up in a disaster of us just spending
Yeah.
too much on a question and answer and being super weak. And yeah, so prepare for both as an interviewer and interview is super important, because I also, from the other experience of being an interviewee, um, I tried those interviews where I didn't prepare at all. It was also a disaster. Like, I couldn't bring up situations on the spot. My answers were really bad. I was constantly going into circles. So preparation both ways is super important. So don't ever forget that. Like, even because my first thought, after some time not having interviews at all, I was like, I have 10 years of experience in the industry. I should be able to wing it. No. Unless you're gifted and you're very talented, don't ever think you can win an interview. Like, always prepare.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually sometimes experience a little bit of an imposter syndrome because I feel like my interviewing skills are better than my actual job performance skills. So I feel like I'm so good at being interviewed, that I am capable of getting a job I'm not capable of doing. That's and so that's something that actually scares me a little bit, is that like, oh, I'm totally just tricking these people into giving me a job, but I'm not actually able to do it. But then, of course, when I get the job, everything's fine. But it's fun how the differential between interviewer skills and your capabilities on the job can, mean that interviewing is challenging even for people who have tons of experience and lots of capabilities. Or vice versa.
Totally, totally.
Um, and yeah, David, I thought your questions were great. I love the way you were bringing in your questions throughout the interview. I love the scoping questions that you were asking. In particular, I think that overall you did a really good job of like trying to align your approach to the intended value of the business. Like, you try to understand, like, what even do you mean by lockbox? Like, what is it? What actually does a lockbox look like for you? The thing that I think you could have asked in that space in particular was, you could have asked, why are you tying lockbox odds to, or to the length of session play? Because that is a very weird thing to do, and there's probably a story behind it and a reason why the company is doing that. And the reason why was, like, I wanted to come up with like a very unusual testing situation that would kind of like get at the like how would you test a blah question, and also showcase this company maybe has some weird ideas about design. And maybe they're not even player friendly ideas about design, especially when it comes to shady microtransactions. But like there was like a underlying intent there in mind, which was, the longer people play, the more likely they are to spend money, especially if you are encouraging them to spend money the longer that they play, by giving them an increased chance of getting the thing that they want. So I had some nefarious intent behind that, that you could have asked more about, and that may have helped inform how you were going to prioritize your testing or approach the testing of that specific mechanic. But ultimately, like the approach that you talked about with how you would test it, I thought was very solid. So I was like, well, I don't feel like he actually missed anything by not having me expand on that. And that's probably the kind of thing that like he wouldn't have any control over, like whether or not we chose to do a mechanic like that. But also, I think that there is something interesting about a candidate who sees something like that and then pushes back on it and says like, hey, I think that this thing that you're doing is really interesting, but maybe it isn't the best way to reach the intended value you're trying to get, and what if we did something else like this instead? That's something I would expect from a person in this position, but maybe not a candidate being interviewed about that question. So overall, I thought your answer there was like really, really, really good. And you did do a really good job of trying to understand, why does this company work the way it does? Like, what value do they see in these approaches that they're doing, and the way that they're doing things, which I really liked. And then yeah, also like you were really professional in how you handled Marcin's questions, which were just, oh my god, I was having so much trouble keeping a straight face. Um, Anyway, I think that's about all the time we have for today. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today for this. This was a lot of fun, super interesting topic. I think maybe we'll have to do another one of these sometime in the not too distant future. But before we go, I want to give everyone a chance to plug something, whether it's a project that you're working on, or a game you want to recommend people check out, or what have you, or Evgeny, if you want to plug your YouTube channel again, that would be great. Anyway, who wants to go first?
I'll be on the humble side, guys. Thank you for having me. If you wanna join, connect me on my LinkedIn and follow me on YouTube channel. But thank you very much for inviting me. That was fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming. It was great to have you. David?
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm most active on our Discord. So the Underground QA Discord. Personally, I'll probably be speaking out a bit more, as I would like to do more of those in-person meetups for anybody that's in the Orange County area. So if that is of interest to you, please go ahead, join the Discord, join that the SoCal region, I think is what we've got. Because I would like to see if we can get more in-person communication. Just, again, no expectations. I would just love to chat with more people about what practices they are doing in QA, compare and contrast that to what I'm doing, and just kind of keep an open mind, keep iterating, keep improving. And if you're interested in those discussions, there's a lot of that happening on the Discord server.
I think, David, we even can team up because I also host.
I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I'm definitely going to be asking you about that after this.
Let's do this. Let's do this. Yeah, I am open, very open.
Excellent.
Marcin?
I have nothing to plug. Just join our community. I love it so much. Like, even if you are, not as open to be talking about anything, there are a lot of great discussion that I just love observing from the side, and just sucking up the knowledge and experience from people like a sponge. So join the community, especially that a lot of topics or a lot of podcast topics or ideas we get from the community. So The more the merrier, and it's a lovely bunch. Like, even if there were any heated discussions, like, the community is so lovely and professional, and we get a lot of good topics going around on variety of either being technical, programming, management, or even some spicy topics that are going around the industry. So, lovely, it would be awesome to see you there with us.
Yeah, I honestly, as one of the moderators of our Discord, I can say that it is a much easier Discord to moderate than other Discord channels because everyone in there is coming in with a very professional mindset. They're there to focus on their career, and they're trying to improve as quality professionals and connect with other quality professionals. And so overall, like, I really love our community and the way that we interact with each other. It's just a very like positive and supportive environment. Also, another thing that we're trying to do more consistently going forward now is we're going to try and have a community discussion ahead of each podcast episode that we do about the topic of the podcast. So for this one, for example, we had a community discussion. God, what is it, last week or a couple weeks ago? I can't even remember. But we had a community discussion. Yeah, specifically about these kinds of this topic, like what kinds of interview questions have stumped you, what kinds of interview questions did you not like, what red flags have you noticed at companies that you've interviewed with. And that actually informed a lot of our approach here today. We took a lot of questions directly from those community notes, and we took a lot of red flags from those community notes too, to help inform how Marcin was going to play bad cop here. So it was a lot of fun, and we're going to keep doing that. So if you want to join in on those community discussions, if it interests you, in potentially getting involved in our community or our podcast in some form, I definitely recommend joining Discord, and then also feel free to reach out to us on there if you're interested in getting more involved in supporting the podcast through volunteering, or supporting the Discord through volunteering to help moderate, or whatever the case may be. We love to get some help. Also, I want to plug one of Evgeny's videos in particular. He did a mock interview video with James Bach. James Bach is a infamous QA professional in the industry. I think that one of my favorite pastimes right now is watching him get ornery on LinkedIn. So I highly recommend checking out that video in particular. I just linked it in the chat. And I also recommend, any YouTube video you can find with James Bach in it. Even if you don't agree with him, he's just a very interesting person with a lot of very interesting ideas about QA, and it's very, very thought provocative overall. So yeah, thank you again, David, Evgeny, Marcin, for joining us. Before we go, I wanted to talk about a bug of the day, which I have one, and it's specifically related to Baldur's Gate 3, which is a very awesome game if you haven't had a chance to play it. My brother was telling me about his experience with Baldur's Gate 3, and in this game, you have the option to romance a bunch of the NPCs in the game, and but sometimes the NPCs might enter into a state where they think you are romancing them when you are not. And so there was one point in particular where this character, Gale, was talking to my brother and saying, like, hey, I really had fun last night, and was like talking about how much he enjoyed the previous night. And my brother was like, I told you to buzz off. What's happening here?
That's
I want to see what was the name of the bug. Like, NPCs in the game are too horny. Examples.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that all of those characters very aggressively flirt with you. Like, there's one character that's like, I like the way you smell, or something like that, just like right out of the gate. It's so much. Anyway, if you are into that kind of thing, Baldur's Gate 3, great game, lots of fun. Also just a great a CRPG in general. So I've been thoroughly enjoying it myself. Anyway, that was a fun bug. So also, if you have any suggestions for future topics or bugs of the day, we'd love to hear from them. If you're a QA professional and you'd love to be on the podcast with us, we'd love to have you. In either case, please reach out to us at undergroundgameqaconf at gmail.com, or you can reach out on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or you can join our Discord and then contact us there. Just message any of the admins directly if you have any interest in joining the podcast as a guest, or if you have some specific topics that you would like to see. We also have a suggestions channel that people can make suggestions about the podcast if they'd like to see specific topics or guests appear on the podcast. So that's it for us today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And as always, please keep playing, keep testing, and keep washing your hands. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.